Good evening, folks. This is Mike Sarnowski, Vice President of Sports for Special Olympics Maryland. Thank you for taking some time this evening so we can review the coach education and development system that we implemented about a year and a half ago, or at least started rolling it out then. And the upcoming, I don't want to call them changes, but the upcoming implications, and we'll talk through that. So be happy to answer any questions as well. The whole purpose of tonight is to maybe better explain the system and the model and the certification, but to answer your questions as well. So thank you for taking that time. Here's our agenda. We'll go through what's new. We'll review the model and talk about the implications of full implementation. We had well, we'll talk about that when we get to it, but we're moving into the full implementation stage with the Summer Games of 2020, or the Summer Games seasons of 2020. Go through resources and then some additional Q&A, if there is any. We will, what I'd ask you to do is, I'll go through each section. If you could hold your questions until I finish a section, because it's quite possible that I may be answering your question as I go forward. Certainly we'll stop each time and do our best to answer that. And then also, if we get to the end and there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, I'm happy to stay on the line for a bit. So let's go ahead and dive in. And I'm sorry, if you are not familiar with the GoToWebinar interface, if you have a question, you can raise your hand using the control panel that's there on your screen, or you can type a question into the question box. And again, I'm not going to be looking at that constantly, but I will look at that and check those as we get to each question break point. And then later, either tonight or tomorrow, we'll post a copy of these slides on the coach resource page, along with a link to the recording. We're going to use one of the recordings from the sessions. This is the 4th session that we've done all the same content. We'll just use whichever one is best. And so we'll have that up. If not today, it'll go up tomorrow. And then we'll send a note out to all the coaches with the links to that information. So let's see. So what's new? Quite frankly, nothing is new in terms of the model. The model itself has not changed from when we rolled it out, again, about 18 months ago, and started sharing it with area directors and then rolled it out with coaches back in 2019. What will change is that we'll be moving into a what we're calling full implementation, starting with the Sports for Summer Games. When we rolled out the model and talked about coach certification and the requirements of it, or coach sports certification to clarify, and the requirements of it, a number of area leaders, area directors, requested, I think wisely, I think it was a smart move, that asked, can we delay in having any of the consequences come into play? The requirements are still in place and have been in place for over a year now, but we haven't actually implemented any of the consequences or any of the implications if someone is not able to complete the or does not complete the certification or meet the standards for that. That's now going to kick in. We agreed to delay it for a year, and it's going to be kicking in now with Summer Games, or the seasons of Sports for Summer Games, and we'll talk through all that here. Kind of in summary, some of the implications are noted there that in order to bring athletes to a state competition, there must be with that team a fully certified head coach that it meets not just the volunteer screening and the protected behaviors and the concussion, but also the sport certification for that particular sport. In addition, only those coaches who meet that certification will be credentialed as coaches at events, and only those coaches will be able to do those things that coaches are permitted to do at those events, including such things as being on the team bench or access to coach areas that maybe are designated and so on down the line. And then thirdly, the third implication, if you will, is noted there, is that only advanced coaches or coaches that have met that advanced certification are able to take athletes to any event above the state level, such as to USA Games, to World Games, or to any of the National Invitational Tournaments, or NITs, that we have for various sports. And we'll talk through each of these in a little more detail. But first, let's talk about the development model and such. First, why is coach education and development important? The bottom line is our athletes deserve it. Our athletes deserve to have the best educated and best skilled coaches that we possibly can. And part of that is regularly refreshing and renewing a coach's knowledge. Many of you know me. Many of you know I've been a track coach for quite some time, and with all due modesty, within the state of Maryland for Special Olympics, I'm one of the most knowledgeable folks on track and field, not necessarily the most, but one of the most. But that said, I am regularly learning new information. Literally every training session or learning experience that I have, either as an attendee or as a presenter, I learn something new from the content or oftentimes from the other coaches that are there. Regular lifelong learning is a key component, and I'm a very strong advocate of that. And the model is built on that. It constantly is improving the skills and abilities of coaches, and therefore is improving the training that's provided to our athletes. Plus, quite honestly, it's the standard for almost any reputable sports organization to regularly have coach recertification. In fact, many such organizations require that on an annual basis. Our model is keeping consistent with other certifications that Special Olympics has. Our model is for 3 years that it needs to be renewed, and we'll talk through that again. So where did the model come from? And again, this is all hopefully is repeat, but we know that we can always do a better job of explaining things. So this was launched back with the area directors, the ADs, in 2018. It came from Special Olympics North America. There was a team of folks from across the country, sports people, coaches, etc., including our own Jim Schmutz, who is our CEO and president, but is also very sports oriented and has spent many, many years as a sports director prior to his in Special Olympics prior to his becoming our CEO. We have, based on feedback, or we did, I should say, based on feedback from area leaders, made a couple tweaks to the model, which we'll talk through as we go through the next slides. But it's pretty much intact, and it made the coach certification overall from what had been the previous model much easier. Again, as I noted before, we agreed at the suggestion from a number of area leaders to delay the implications, if you will, until 2020, the Summer Games of 2020, and we were happy to do that. But that time has now come, and we'll go forward. I should also say I'm very happy and very pleased with the number of coaches who have stepped up and taken the courses and gotten and improved their education and their knowledge of their sports and Special Olympics in general throughout this past year. We've had literally, I think it's close to 1,000 course completions in the last 12 to 18 months, which is just phenomenal, and are very, very pleased with that. And just kind of now bringing it on home and going again into that full implementation. So we had presented back when a nice text-heavy description of the model of the education system, and Janet Larimore, many of you know, from Howard County, did just a phenomenal job of converting that into a graphic that we've been using it since. The full description is available on the coach resource page, which hopefully all of you are aware of. If we have a chance, we'll go there as well so you can see where some things are. But again, the full model is there. Here is the that summary of that. So, and we'll go through each section here. What you can see, though, is as we go from a general volunteer to a sport volunteer, assistant coach, and so on, they have a consistent progression of additional learning experiences that are necessary as you go forward. I should also say, as I may have already noted, The certification is good for 3 years across the board. So let's start off with the general volunteer level. This is your general volunteer, not serving really in a coaching role, not supervising athletes in training or competition, not doing sports instruction. They really don't have, for lack of a better term, custody or responsibility of athletes. This could be someone at your finish line, you running a stopwatch, or it could be someone managing your equipment or something like that. Those individuals, as with any volunteer, need to have their volunteer application and background check and their protected behaviors, again, both good for 3 years. We then, this is one tweak that we made to the model, the original model that Special Olympics North America put forward, is, again, at area leader suggestion, we added a level called sport volunteer. This is for those individuals who aren't really coaching but are more actively involved with the running of a training program. So they do have some responsibility for athletes. They're there with them. The best example is what some areas call a sport coordinator. I know several, Baltimore County, Howard County, and several others use this, where that's the person who kind of manages, for lack of a better term, the more administrative nature or aspects of the training program, so that the coaches can focus in on the coaching component. That's not the only example, but that would be one example. And just as the volunteer from the previous slide might be credentialed at a competition as a volunteer or a chaperone, here this person could be credentialed as a sport volunteer or HOD, or of course could be a volunteer chaperone. The additional component that they need to have, in addition to the background check and the protected behaviors, is the concussion protocol or concussion course that many of you hopefully are very familiar with. And again, good for 3 years. Then the next step in the model is the assistant coach level. This is someone who serves in a coaching role, but they're doing it under the supervision and under the guidance of a certified head coach. And big note here is this certification as an assistant coach is not specific to any sport. If you're certified as an assistant coach, you can be an assistant coach for any sport that your program may offer. Can't be a head coach for any sport, but you can be an assistant coach. So that kind of, because again, the content that they're doing and the type of thing they're doing is underneath or at the under the supervision of a fully certified head coach. In addition to the background check and protected behaviors and concussion, these individuals need to complete Coaching Special Olympics Athletes, that course. In some situations, Coaching Unified Sports would be acceptable. 90% of the time, what they need to take is Coaching Special Olympics Athletes. Where Coaching Unified Sports would be appropriate is if they're coaching or they're working with programs that are essentially exclusively unified sports. So if they are working as an assistant coach, or volunteering, I should say, as an assistant coach for a unified soccer team, then Coaching Unified Sports would be appropriate. Also, I think golf is really the only individual sport that might fall into this category, where the overwhelming majority of golfers do it as a unified pair. And so Coaching Unified Sports would be potentially appropriate there. Everybody else really should be taking Coaching Special Olympics Athletes, and that is that core requirement for that role. Should also point out that Coaching Special Olympics Athletes, there was a rumor somewhere, somehow, I don't know where, where it got started. You only need to take it once. It is not a course that you need to retake every 3 years. So one time, you're certainly welcome to take it again. And if you're doing it with a live course, that can actually be kind of interesting, because the live course is very focused on conversation and discussion. And again, you can really learn some nice things from other coaches and getting to know them. But it is only required that you take it one time. The next level is the head coach certification level. Doesn't necessarily mean that the person is serving as the head coach of a team, but they are certified as a head coach or at the head coach level. They can be the main coach of a team, but again, they could serve as an additional coach within that program. Strongly recommend that any program have many people, or as many as they can, certified at this level. One, it makes your coaching staff or your coaching team that much stronger in your ability to present the best coaching opportunity or learning opportunity for your athletes. But also, if your typical head coach is for some reason unavailable to go to a competition or whatever, something happens and they're not available, you have plenty of backups at that point. This person will be credentialed as a head coach or as just a coach within any of the competitions that we have. And you'll note there on the side, in addition to everything that the assistant coach needed to complete, this person needs to have completed, to get that head coach certification, a sports-specific course. That's there. One thing to note there, and we'll talk a little bit about grandfathering in and honoring previous certifications. If someone has a head coach certification or is certified at the head coach level, but because they completed that certification 2 years ago or whatever, in order to renew that certification, they must complete coaching Special Olympics athletes, or again, for that limited 10% of folks coaching unified sports. They will not, they could take all the sports-specific courses in the world, but if they haven't taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, their certification is not going to be renewed and not going to be extended. That, and that is a big change from the previous model. It's not a change that we're implementing now. We implemented it 1.5 years ago, but it is a change from previous education models. That coaching Special Olympics athletes course is that core course that everyone has to take going through. And again, as is noted there, they could be as a head coach or an assist or a just coach with that. Then the new level to the model, again, when this model was rolled out, it was something that hadn't been there before, is that of an advanced coach, sometimes called a level 3 coach. Again, advice from our area leaders was to use the words advanced coach rather than level 3 or level 2 or whatever. So we went that route. This person is an experienced head coach. We're saying a minimum of 2 years of coaching experience to reach this level. This is required in order to serve as a coach at any event above the state level. We're talking to go as a coach, or actually, quite frankly, to be considered for selection as a coach for USA Games, for World Games, for any of the NITs or National Invitational Tournaments, such as Unified Bowling, Golf, Softball. There's a tennis one in Hilton Head as well. The NERSA Flag Football event, which is held at College Park each year, but it's pulled. It's multiple teams from around the country are there. All of those, in order to be considered to coach at that level, and quite frankly, to have your team considered for selection at that level, you must be certified as an advanced coach. And the additional component for that, as you can see from the grid there, is the Principles of Coaching course that had been offered online. With the online offering, just bluntly, was not terribly satisfactory to the coaches who tried it or took it. That has now been eliminated. It is no longer, at the moment, offered online. Special Olympics North America is working on developing an additional online offering for that. However, we here at Special Olympics Maryland are going to be offering it at least for this year, at least twice, potentially 3 times if there's sufficient interest. This went out in the email that went out to coaches a couple of weeks ago, with a session on March 7th and another session on June 20th. And we'll add another one in the fall if there is enough interest and enough need for that. It's an excellent course. It's a full day. But we also have some folks who had taken it previously, so we do have some advanced coaches out there. But again, the key thing, this is really only has any effect on taking someone to the next level of competition. With that in mind, I should clarify It is just because you're taking your team outside of the state of Maryland does not mean that that's the next level of competition. Key example that I've used for each of these sessions is Delaware, Special Olympics Delaware, holds a really nice cycling competition as a part of their fall sports festival or their fall sports competition. I think typically it's in September. Several of our programs take their cycling teams, some of our areas take their cycling teams to that competition. That does not require an advanced coach level. You're not going above the state level. You're just going to another state to do that. Some folks go to some competitions in either DC or Pennsylvania or Virginia and so on. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about advancing to a next level. And those opportunities that are listed there, and there's some others I'm sure that are not listed. These folks would be credentialed at a state competition as either a head coach or a coach as we go forward. With that, so for renewals, I mentioned before that they're valid. Sports certifications are valid for 3 years. If you're an assistant coach, you have a couple options. One, you can renew your certification by completing your assistant coach certification by completing any approved course. You could, if you wanted, take coaching Special Olympics athletes a second time, but there are several other courses that could be of value to you or of interest. In addition, the other opportunity you could do is to take a sports-specific course and earn your head coach certification for that sport, and we strongly encourage that. That said, what we will point out, and you'll see if you haven't already looked at some of the rosters that are on the coach resource page, if a person, whether they've been certified in a sport as a head coach or certified in a sport as a advanced coach, if they have completed coaching Special Olympics athletes, they're also going to have a certification as an assistant coach so that they can utilize that for any and all sports. The advanced coach and the head coach are specific to sports, so you could be a head coach for track and field. If you've completed coaching Special Olympics athletes, you could also be an assistant coach for any sport because, again, the assistant coach is not specific to a sport. For head coaches, also sometimes referred to as level 2, the options are to complete a sport-specific course, and that'll renew your certification for that sport that's there. Again, these would be courses that are either hosted by or approved by Special Olympics Maryland, or, and that sport-specific course will renew your head coach certification or your advanced coach certification. It would move those ahead as well. For that specific sport. If you take a sport-specific course, it advances that specific course, plus also your assistant coach certification. You could alternatively take a more general one, a non-specific or non-sport-specific course, and that would serve to renew all of your certifications. Several of our coaches, looking at some of the names on the screen right now, many of you are coaching multiple sports. If you take a general course or a non-sport specific course or learning opportunity, that'll serve to renew all of your certifications, all of your sport certifications for 3 years from the date of the course. That said, don't be going down the road of thinking, okay, I'll just keep taking advanced or general courses. You do need to complete a course for the specific sport at least once every 6 years or every 2 certification renewals. What we don't want to have happen is someone who has had one course and one learning opportunity on their sport, on softball, 20 years ago, and they've renewed their certification each year by taking a general course. We want to be sure that you're regularly getting that sport-specific input and knowledge and expanding your knowledge base with that. And then again, as noted there at the bottom, renewing your head coach would renew your assistant coach certification if you have that. And the reason I say if you have that, you could have a head coach certification for which, if you hadn't, it was grandfathered in, you didn't, you had earned it prior to the change to this new model. So you would need to you would have to take that coaching Special Olympics athletes course. So as noted here, so coaches with existing certifications, when we implemented the model, we did not wipe out everybody's certifications that already existed. We honored whatever the expiration date was for that certification. We honor that, regardless of whether they've completed coaching Special Olympics athletes or not. We honored that. We're not going to, again, take that away. However, if they haven't taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, the only way that they can earn or renew their sport-specific course is to complete coaching Special Olympics athletes. That's the only way it's going to be extended. We'll also accept principles of coaching, because that's sort of, we describe principles of coaching as CSOA, or coaching Special Olympics athletes on steroids. It's a much deeper dive. It's a full day course. It covers the same content there. And then, of course, there's also as noted there, the Coaching Unified Sports folks for that small 10%. So if you have a head coach in your program, or if you are a head coach in your program, you have your head coach certification from before this new model, and you've never taken coaching Special Olympics athletes, you can take 20 sport-specific courses for your sport. You're not going to get your certification renewed. You have to take that coaching Special Olympics athletes. There is no exception to that. That is the core of the model. Should also note, as we're going through here, that serving as an instructor for any course counts as attending that course. And so we do have several different folks who serve in that role and have renewed their certifications by being an instructor. We don't take it just anybody as an instructor. We certainly would need to be approved by here at headquarters, either by myself for the general content or the general courses, or the sport specific, or the sport director for the sport specific stuff. But that is an opportunity as well. And again, if you're an active participant in the course as an instructor, you're learning as well as you're going through. So actually, before we go to implications, wanted to see, are there any questions about the model and the what's expected, what's required to earn certifications and to maintain them? If so, you can either raise your hand or type it into the question box. Okay. Seeing none, we'll move forward. This is great. I hope this means that we're doing a good job of explaining things to you, and it's comprehensible, and hopefully that you can, if you're an area leader, that you can explain it as well to your coaches, maybe a little better than may have been the case before. So implications of full implementation. And as I noted at the beginning, they kind of fall into three broad categories, or three general categories, I should say. One, it has an impact on bringing athletes or teams to a state competition. The only athletes who can come to a state competition, starting with the Summer Games sports for 2020, are those athletes who have a fully certified head coach, including with that certification valid through Summer Games, through the date of the competition, to bring them to the event and to work with them throughout the season. If they don't have that fully certified head coach, the athletes unfortunately will not be able to attend the state competition. Again, kudos to the work of the area leaders and the coaches who have gone through, and again, the wisdom of the advice and the recommendation from the area leaders a year ago or so to let's have a slow or a long runway in getting this launched. I think that's really helped get so many of the coaches taken care of. That said, there are still a number of coaches who have not yet met the certification requirements, but there's time to do that. One note there also that for what we're calling true team sports, such as basketball, flag football, softball, soccer, or cheerleading, those are the ones that are offered at the state level. For those, there needs to be a fully certified head coach for each team. Whereas for a sport like track and field or swimming, even though, yes, there are some team components in there, such as a relay, or in bocce, there's doubles teams and such. The gist of the crux of that sport is an individual sport. There, you need a head coach for your program, for one option there, but again, strongly recommend having multiple ones. For true team sports, you need to have a fully certified head coach for each team. In addition, and this is not new, but for all of those 5 sports, with the exception of cheerleading, so for basketball, flag football, softball, and soccer, it needs to be a different head coach for each team. For those 4 sports, the head coach cannot serve as the head coach for more than one team. Cheerleading, the nature of the competition is different, where we don't need to have that. But for the other sports, it is quite possible that if a head coach were to be a coach for 2 teams, they may be competing at the same time. Heck, they may be competing against each other. And so we set long ago the standard that you need a separate head coach for that. And again, cheerleading, it's different, where they're not going to be competing simultaneously, just because of the nature of the competition. So again, strongly recommend multiple. In general, or I should say, the standard going forward is that this requirement must be met by the training registration deadline, which is, I hope everybody on the phone is familiar. We go over the training registration deadline and the competition registration deadline and such at each of the preseason webinars. So that'll be the standard. To give an even longer runway for summer games for this first full implementation, we're going to give you to the competition registration deadline to be sure that your folks can complete that. After that, it's the training registration deadline going forward. And again, we certainly hope it's not the case. We hope through information that we send out and training that we've given now to the area managers of their database, of the GMS database, where they can run and customize their reports, that there really should not be a reason that a coach is not informed and advised of what they need to do. But again, hopefully we will not be in a situation of saying, some athletes or teams can't come to the state competition, to summer games, to the kayaking competition, whatever, golf, so on down the line. But if they aren't meeting the requirements, that absolutely will come into play. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but, it will come into play. The second category, if you will, of the implications is credentialing and serving as a coach at a state competition. So only those individuals who have met the head coach or advanced coach certification will be credentialed as either a coach or head coach. Area leaders, you can designate who the head coach is. So there again, in most sports, you can only have one head coach unless you have multiple teams. This you can still designate that, but they have to have met either the head coach certification or the advanced coach certification to be credentialed as a head coach or assistant coach. Only those who have met at least that assistant coach certification will be credentialed as assistant coach. What does that mean? That they can only serve, they are the only ones who can serve in a coaching role. If you are not credentialed as a coach or head coach, or in some cases an assistant coach, you can't actually coach a team. You can't represent the team at coach meetings. Hopefully that's not an incentive to not complete your certification, but that can be very important. Filing protests, sitting on the team bench, it's going to be limited to credentialed coaches, and so on down. There are, it's going to vary what the specifics are by sport. And one of the things that we will do is in each preseason webinar, which most coaches are attending, and there's a recording of it and so on, there'll be a delineation of what only coaches are allowed to do for that sport at the state competition. We'll be working with the sport directors as well as the sports management teams to determine exactly what requires a coach in order to do. But again, that's we're not going to, oh, Bill's been a coach for 20 years. Can't you just put coach on his credential? Unfortunately, the answer is no. If Bill hasn't met those requirements, the certification requirements that we talked about. And then the third, again, is competition above the state level. Only those who have earned and maintained that advanced coach certification will be considered for selection. This is something you need to complete before we get into the selection mode. As an example, we don't have the specific dates lined up, but for the 2022 USA Games that are going to be held in Orlando, we'll be making the selection sometime in between May of 2021 and August of 2021, probably sometime in that window. The only people who would be considered for a coaching role or to be selected for a coaching role will be those people who have already met and maintained their advanced coach certification level. In addition, in order for a team to be considered for selection, they must have their head coach have met the advanced coach certification level. And that's why we're offering the live Principles of Coaching course at least twice. We'll offer it a third time. We'll offer it 6 times if there's an interest and a need. There's sort of a critical mass you have to hold the course, so we can't do it as one-offs with individuals. It is definitely a conversation, discussion type of focus. But as long as there's interest and as long as we can fit it in the calendar, we'll continue to do that until the interest wanes off, and then we'll have it at least once or twice each year. And again, the different components are listed there as to what that could advance to. But again, this really only impacts above the state level, and it's something that needs to be. It is not the case. Let me put it that way. It's not the case that someone gets selected and then they'll earn that advanced coach certification. It's not how it works. You need to have earned it ahead of time to even be considered. And I'm very happy to see that many people have signed up already for the classes that we have on March 7th and June 20th for that. So that said, any questions or any clarification needed on the implications of full implementation, those 3 categories, before we go into resources and things that are available. Again, this is your opportunity. Not that you will never have an opportunity to ask questions later, but this is your opportunity to ask anything. And while I'm looking to see if we have a hand raised, I'll take a drink of water. Okay. Not seeing any. We'll go ahead. Okay. So resources that are available. The coach resource page, link is noted there. Within that, there is a link. It's now been moved to the top of that page for the subpage of the coach education and development page that's there. And when we get through these here, we'll go to there so you can see it. On there is a couple versions of the what we're calling the training transcripts, which is a listing of all the courses that anyone has taken, as well as the sports certification reports that are there. We openly acknowledge we had some challenges getting that information reported on a regular basis and updated. We've got that problem solved, and it will be updated a minimum of once per month. The one that's up there right now was posted January 20th, I believe. We'll have another one actually next week, so that's quicker than once a month. The reason being is we have enough new courses being completed that it's worthwhile doing an updated report. So if that is the case, we certainly will do that. It's relatively quick, but it's not something we're going to update every day or every week, unless there is a fair amount of activity that's in there. But that is, at a minimum, it'll be once a month. On there, as well as the coach education and development model, the more texty one, as well as the graphic that Janet put together, as well as links to the briefings that we did a year or more ago. This recording will be there as well for anybody who has questions. Listing of the non-sport specific coach education opportunities, and we are adding more and more with that. Links to online coaching opportunities, and then not so much on the sports certification, but links to the volunteer forms of protective behavior certification course, concussion, etc. On the sports specific pages, we are adding courses now or opportunities now. I know for basketball this past season, not that it was an enforced requirement at that point, but I believe Melissa and the sports management team for basketball, I believe they had 6 different live sessions, a couple webinars, and then there's the online option through Human Kinetics as well. Our goal is to have a minimum of 1 live, 1 webinar, and 1 online option per sport. I know that there are some swimming courses up. I added personally 2 track or athletics courses, 1 master coaches, which if anybody hasn't taken that or unfamiliar with it, it's focused on those coaches who have 5 or more years of experience, and it's a conversation around addressing coach issues. It's facilitated and so on, but it's actually really great, I believe, for those more experienced coaches. And then we're also going to do a second one, another course on officiating as a coach. The SMTs or sports management teams are still working on various ones. Also will be for track and for other sports, we'll be looking at having at least 1 online, 1 live course, in-person course as well. The only way, and again, those are minimums, the only way we'll drop below that minimum is in a given year would be if for a specific sport that is a smaller sport, tennis, I'll use as an example. It may be that none of the coaches for tennis, because there's not as many individual county programs on that, that they need the certification. We would certainly survey or contact the coaches ahead of time to see if there is a need. And if there isn't, we would still have the online and the webinar option. We may not do a live one or vice versa. But for those other sports, if there is a need and there is an interest, we certainly will look at many opportunities there. And we're very interested, again, in working with area leaders and area programs to host them out there. We'll give whatever approval is necessary for specific instructors or presenters and such. We are similarly working within that, and this is still a bit of a build, but trying to have various opportunities for various level coaches. With basketball, as an example, I think there were, this past season, the sports management team was able to have a skills level training, I think a unified training and a 5v5 or 3v3 training as well. So trying to get various opportunities. We'll continue to look at more opportunities so that what we don't want to have happen is a coach repeat the same course, unless they want to, but to have a coach repeat the same course going on. So, but anyhow, we're continuing to build that. In addition, as I think I noted a moment ago, we're training the area GMS managers. We had 2 sessions with that, the second one last night. We actually will do 1 more because of a recording glitch last night, so I need to re-record it, and we'll offer it up. We'll have that go out either tonight or tomorrow. But they're trained and have job aids through slide decks on how to run specific reports for their area. We're also making a couple changes to the database, which will take till the end of the month to do it, to make some of those reports a little bit more user-friendly, unfortunately. GMS is a great program. It isn't necessarily designed to do this, and so we're having to make some adaptations and adjustments to the database. I just want to be super careful that we don't screw something up in the process. But again, several of the GMS managers have gone through that and at least reportedly found the sessions helpful. This is an example of the coach transcripts. So you can see it's alphabetical. The ones that we post on the network or on the coach resource page there's 2 different versions. One is for those coaches who have participated at some point or those people, I should say. They may no longer be in a coaching role. They could be a unified partner. But for those people who have participated in the last 3 years, sort of. And what I mean by that is right now, it's anybody who participated in 2018, anybody who participated in 2019, and anybody who participated in 2020 to date. We'll keep adding to 2020, to the folks from 2020, at least once a month as we go through and they get added to the database, because we constantly are adding new people there. At the end of 2020, we'll cycle that to then go from 2019, 2020, and 2021. So it's always those coaches who've been involved in the past couple years. It's a list that's just called active participants. So, and again, your GMS managers know that. But so there's that component of those who are active, and then there's also a version of the same report run the same day for everybody. So it includes coaches who have previously participated but maybe aren't active right now. Similarly, and also as one note here, this includes their certifications or their expirations for their concussion, their protected behaviors, and their volunteer screening. As hopefully we'll be able to show you, if anybody is not aware of this, when you're looking at a PDF file online, it's searchable using your browser. At least it's definitely able to do it within Chrome and within Microsoft Edge. I'm not as familiar with Firefox or Safari. I would imagine you can. I can't promise that, but we'll show you that in a moment. For the sports certification, similarly here, this is the listing here. So for, let's just take David Ambrose. Again, he's met the head coach certification requirements and has completed CSOA. Because he's done that, he also has his assistant coach for all sports. We changed some terminology from some previous versions of it. But we can see his certification. He's good for basketball through December of 22, or mid-December at least, and soccer similarly. One of the things that we unfortunately at the moment cannot get on here on this listing is that we post is the area. It's a database structure issue. That's one of those things that I mentioned. We're making some updates and some adjustments, at least to the extent that we can, and expect to have that done by the end of the month, and we'll edit this to include that. One other thing, a change I made today based on some feedback from last night, where it says needs CSOA, we've added the words to renew. There have been some confusion that came up. So again, there are some things we can change, some things we can customize, not always, but where we can and where it makes sense, we'll do it. Of course, we can't do it for 20 different requests on the same item. We need to be kind of consistent, but those that make sense, we certainly will do. And we can, and it just may take a little time based on being really careful with the database. So actually, now we'll flow through these. So coach education opportunities, again, this hopefully is familiar, but they need to be approved by SOMD in advance. There's some that are already pre-approved with coaching Special Olympics athletes and such. But we are very open to additional suggestions. I'm surprised we don't get very many. There's only one right now that anyone has suggested from Howard County that we're investigating. We would require, if you have a suggestion or your area has a suggestion for something to consider, either specifically for a sport or general, we're not just going to automatically say yes. We do need to get some information on what's the curriculum, what's covered. If it's a live or where it's a presenter doing it, we want to know a little bit about the presenter to make sure that we have a quality person that's doing it. We're not doubting you, but we need to do our due diligence, and our athletes deserve it. And then as I noted before, if you're an instructor or facilitator for a course, that counts as having completed it. For going forward, we will be hosting here at headquarters, assuming we have enough sign up. Again, Coaching Special Olympics Athletes has sort of a bare minimum or critical mass of, we say 5 to 7, but we have, 4 sessions, 1 a month, scheduled through May. We'll add more if there's a need. We have done some training with some area folks, some who have been trained several years ago. We renewed their training, their ability to offer Coaching Special Olympics athletes. We've trained some new folks and have a couple people in the chute that we're trying to complete the training for. Thrilled to do that, and they can be offering courses, live courses in your local territory. Of course, there's also the online version of Coaching Special Olympics athletes for those who prefer that or who aren't near one of the live courses. principles of coaching I mentioned before. Just to clarify, because we've gotten this question, the preseason webinar and the pre-competition webinars that we provide for every sport do not count as a coach education opportunity. They're informational about the upcoming season. And it's really not, yes, there's information conveyed, but they're really not designed as a coach development or a coach education component, and they are not considered as part of this. Approved courses, I'm not going to read through this. This slide you've probably seen 20 times. It hasn't been changed. Of just a listing of different sports specific, lots of opportunities. We're looking at some new aspects or opportunities as well. We will be doing, because of popularity, more and more of the, 1 second, get rid of that. More and more of the master coaches. If I need to host them myself as a facilitator, not that I'm an expert in every sport, but we'll host those provided there's an interest. Those are also ones where there needs to be a kind of critical mass for the conversation. You see that there, some suggestions also, or some opportunities for the coaching in general aspects. And again, we are very open to suggestions or recommendations. And if it's something in general, you can contact me directly or send a note to coaches@somd.org, or you can reach out to the sport director, which they're all listed on the last slide. Online learning through HK, Human Kinetics, all there, as has been the case for many years. Special Olympics Maryland continues to provide a subsidy of up to $20 for anyone who completes an online course, or well, who pays for and completes successfully an online course. Just need to send your their proof of payment as well as proof of successful completion to coaches@somd.org. In some cases, some areas may be providing additional reimbursement for those courses that are more expensive than $20. It varies by area. Not every area is in a financial situation to be able to do that. So check with your area leadership in case that's the case. Let's see. One note with that also, and I found this as I was going through and doing some cleanup, shockingly, so we get, for a couple things. Number one, we don't automatically get a notice that you've completed a course. For some courses, we do a month or 2 months later get an update, but that's strictly for coaching Special Olympics athletes through HK and coaching unified sports. And invariably, we find some coaches who successfully completed the course 6 weeks prior and never sent in that they had taken the course. Be sure to encourage your coaches to send in that they've completed the course so that we know whether they're asking for reimbursement or not. Send in that they completed the notice that they get from HK or from NFH, National Federation of High School Sports, as well. And then if you have questions, here are the sport directors that are there. Melissa's been with us for a while. Zach's been with us for a couple of years now. Ryan joined us this past summer with their sports. What I'd like to do, though, is let's go to Chrome. I want to be sure you know where some of this stuff is. So the coach resource page, hopefully you've all utilized it or at least visited it. It's an ever-evolving opportunity. It's very basic in design, but that the feedback we've gotten is that actually is really good, particularly if you're trying to use it on a phone. But if you click on Coach Resources, and that comes to this page. There's the Coach Education and Development, which we'll go there in just a moment. The sports calendar that's updated at least once a month, if not every 2 weeks. And then there's an individual page for each sport that you can link to. There's other stuff down here for the codes of conduct, some other coach resources. There's a link to the application forms for medicals, volunteer forms, and so on. But let's go to the Coach Education and Development page. Just here. And as I noted, we have the sports certification reports for active coaches again, those who participated in the 3 most recent calendar years, and then for all coaches. So if we go to, let's open up the one for active coaches. And so hopefully you can see this on your screen, and hopefully I'm using the right version with this. But if you want to search here, you can, if you, in Chrome, we're in right now, if you click those 3 dots, go down, and there is Find, and I'm going to type in Powell, because I know there's a Powell on the phone right now, or on the session. So here that went right to Adam Powell, and Joyce Powell has their head coach certification. Adam's good until March 26th of 2022. Joyce is good until March 17th, as well as, because they've completed coaching Special Olympics athletes, it also has their assistant coach certification, that they're good for any sport that's there. That's why it says all sports. Again, that was something we had tweaked. And again, just type in, let me see who else is here. I'm sure Shelley won't mind that we go to Bogaski. And looks like Shelley and John are going neck and neck trying to get the number of sports that they're certified in. So John is certified as a head coach in bocce, golf, and snowshoeing. All of his certifications here look pretty good, as well as all sports. Shelley is one of our advanced coaches. She's completed coaching principles of coaching. I'm not sure exactly when. We can look at the transcript, but that's there. So yes, it can be a long list. It's, in some cases, 100 pages, but if you use the search function or the find function, that's there. If you're opening it in Microsoft Edge, over on, if you can see where my cursor is, over on this part of the screen, there'll be like one of those little magnifying glasses, and you can just type that in there, and it does exactly the same thing. So if you weren't aware of that, hopefully we've now made you a better user of any website, but this in particular for this. With the training transcripts, let's go to active coaches again, and again, let's just look at the same folks there. There's Bogaski ready to roll. John's had a very active education component going, and you'll see here it goes all the way back. Actually, it'll go back to, I think, 2000, so we can see that. And then Shelley similarly has a pretty active listing of coaches. I should note, while I'm sure Shelley does love coaching Special Olympics athletes, and so, it's not that she's taking the same course all of these times. Montgomery County had done, and I think may continue to do, what we call a deep dive. They'll take one aspect of coaching Special Olympics athletes and have a training specifically on medical aspects in sports or psychological aspects and such. So that's what many of these are breakouts on. And then just to be equitable, Powell, oh, that's Flex. I'm sorry, there's Powell. So Adam has taken coaching Special Olympics athletes and athletics. Joyce has taken some other things. I should point out, we mentioned about we're willing to take any, not any, but consider other options. Joyce, I'm going to put you on the spot for just a second, but I'm not going to open up the line. But Joyce is the only person who suggested or asked about, hey, I'm taking this course as part of my professional certification requirements as a teacher. Is it something that can be considered? And so we looked at it. I wouldn't say that every course for a teacher would meet that standard, but the 2 courses, we didn't put in there exactly what they were, but the 2 courses that she asked about, we did accept. And again, that's been an option that's been available. But Joyce, to date, is the only person who asked about that. So now watch, we'll get a rush of them. But that's great. Hey, if you're learning and the things that are making you a better coach outside of Special Olympics, as long as we know what it is and we have a picture, so we're not, just blindly saying yes to everything, we're happy to do that. So give that some thought, particularly those of you, those of you who have that kind of professional certification that you're renewing. So anyway, wanted to be sure that you were comfortable with this. Again, we'll post here these slides will either go up tonight or tomorrow, more likely tomorrow, as well as a link to a recording of probably this webinar. There's the overall model, and then the more handy-dandy graphics. So you have all these links. These are where those sessions are. Down here are links to the 4 upcoming monthly Coaching Special Olympics athletes opportunities. There's also another one that's being added. I think it's on March 8th that Baltimore City is hosting with Bob Signer, and we'll add more as we have them. Principles of Coaching is there. You just click the link here to register. It goes to a SurveyMonkey, and you complete that SurveyMonkey survey. So on links to online opportunities, and actually at John Bogaski's suggestion, have not gotten to it yet, but we'll be doing a little bit more direct link. Human Kinetics has changed their interface and their website and their store recently, and can get a little bit confusing, and so we'll alter those links. It just hasn't happened yet. So I think that covers what I wanted to be sure that we covered. Let me go back to here in case you aren't familiar with your the different sport directors, but I just want to check. Hopefully this was helpful to folks. But any questions on any aspect of what I've covered tonight? Hopefully for most of you, it was just a review and a refresher. Hopefully there was nothing new other than with summer games, now is when it's going to start kicking in terms of the full implementation and the implications that come with it. So looking. Don't see any hands raised or any questions being typed in. So that said, thank you for taking the time. Again, I hope this was useful. Hope this was helpful. Recording and the slides will be posted within the next 24 hours, let's say. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing some of you at an upcoming event. Thank you very much. Have a great night.